Welcome to the first in a series of videos in which I will attempt to share with you everything I know about creating mods for Stalker 2. 80% of what I'm going to cover in this series will be valid for pretty much any Unreal Engine 5 game. I'll try to point out some aspects that are specific to Stalker 2 versus the Unreal Engine as we go along. But if you stick with me for the entire series, then you'll probably be able to identify those on your own, no problem. So first, there are a handful of videos on YouTube that cover Unreal Engine already, so why am I making my own? None of them, at least that I'm aware of, cover Stalker 2 specifically. Also, most of the videos I have found are going to be aimed at game developers who are designing full games or projects. They don't cover the idiosyncrasies and deviations from the norm that mod makers must take into consideration when we're actually designing mods that are going to be attached to a game and not a full game itself. As I go through the process of making this video series, I will be updating the Stalker 2 modding wiki, which is available modding.wiki. I do consider myself to be pretty well versed on modding and programming in general. But I guarantee you that every topic I'm going to cover here, there's going to be people out there that know more than I do, know of alternative patterns and tools which may be easier to use or more efficient, or just in general just have a better way of doing things. And for those people, I welcome you to go in and change anything that I have put in here, because the ultimate goal of this series is to just make modding more approachable, more fun, and to just get more and better mods out there. So if you think that there's anything you can add to this, either to the modding page or comments on the videos themselves, you're more than welcome to do so. So before we jump into setting up the tools, you're going to need to get started. There are a few basic Unreal Engine terms I wanted to familiarize you with. If you already know the anatomy and structure of Unreal Engine projects, you can go ahead and skip this section. And I'll try to cover this pretty quickly. This is by no means going to be comprehensive. In a very simplistic overview, we have inside of a game, a world is going to contain every level that the game has. In the case of Stalker 2, there's one world and one level that represents the entire map. Inside of the level, you're going to have objects that are going to represent distinct pieces of the game. The two most important objects to be familiar with, because they are pretty different, are actor objects and component objects. Actors are objects that have a set position in the world and they can be placed inside of a level. Pawns are a type of actor that are generally going to represent a character, whether that is a NPC, an enemy, a monster spawn, etc. A player character is a specific type of pawn that represents the character that the player controls. Camera's another type of actor that shows a view of the game world from a movable perspective. So in the case of Stalker 2, that's a first-person game, so that camera is going to be positioned generally where the eyes would be on a player. You can have third-person cameras, you can have overhead cameras, you can have side-scrolling, and that just really is where the camera is going to be while the player is playing the game and how it moves in relation to the player character moving. Static meshes generally are going to be actors that do not move relative to the game world. These are generally things such as trees, buildings, rocks, platforms, but they can also be movable items as well, or things that move around the world, but they're generally simple items such as weapons or shell casings. Volumes are 3D spaces that typically not visible to the player, but they do control what happens when a player is in a certain spot, or preventing them from going to certain places. These are generally going to be things like invisible walls, kill boxes, and triggers, like as in a quest trigger to figure out if a player entered a room so that the next stage of the quest can progress. Components, on the other hand, is a type of object which represents a function which can be added to an actor. So, for example, using Stalker 2 actual components that exist, there's a component called the bloodsucker invisibility component, and it's literally the functionality that whenever a bloodsucker goes into its invisibility mode, all of those actions are controlled by this component. So hypothetically speaking, if someone wanted to go create a mod and remove that component, you could make it so that that particular entity cannot become invisible anymore. There is a component called the deal damage component, which is added to an actor in order to fire an event that modifies their health, typically by dealing damage to them. An explosion component is just what it sounds like. You add that to an actor, and when it's triggered, it will initiate a explosion effect, an area of effect damage to any actors that are nearby. And there's many more. This is just a very high level example. So with the basic terminology out of the way, let's look at the different types and broad categories of mods that currently exist for Stalker 2. There are configuration mods, asset replacement mods, and scripting or logic mods. Configuration mods are something that's relatively unique to Stalker 2, simply because the game exposes so much of its structure and assets in essentially what amount to text files within the game. And while it does take quite a while to understand and research where values and properties are defined within those files, once you do identify something that you want to change, very easy to change the value of whatever you're looking to modify within the game. I think the best example of a configuration mod and how simple they can be versus how impactful the mod ends up being is the no shader warm-up mod. It's a mod I've used since I first started playing Stalker 2, and it only changes one line in the configuration files. And that one line completely removes the startup requirement to compile the shaders every time the game starts. And that just blows my mind that that simple of a change can have such a high impact. Most configuration mods I've seen are more than just one line and one change in one file. But I think it illustrates how impactful a small change can be. Asset replacement mods are a general category of mods that, as opposed to a configuration mod that is changing game values, such as how much stamina is used when you run, or what is the max health of NPCs and enemies. Asset replacement mods are going to be targeting more of the visual aspects of the game, such as replacing out 3D textures to make models of enemies or locations in the game look different, swapping out user interface elements such as widget menus and assets like cursors. Good example of a very large asset replacement mod is Oxide's Expanded Armory. And that's a mod which not only changes some textures for some existing elements in the game, but also adds brand new things into the game that didn't exist before. And on the inverse side, a example of an asset replacement mod that is replacing just one thing as the cursor Pripyat. This is one that changes the default Stalker 2 cursor to look more like the cursor from Call of Pripyat. And finally, scripting mods. This is where we start to open up the complexity a bit in the design of mods. But don't be afraid of it. A lot of these concepts can seem pretty complicated, but I think by the end of the series, you realize that it's not really all that scary. The biggest advantage of designing a scripting mod is that you have much wider access to tools and what you can actually change in the game, especially when you can change it. With scripting mods, you can make changes to assets inside of the game depending on the state of another asset. Whereas the previous two mod categories we covered, you can make changes to the game, but they're going to be changes that are applied before the game even starts. So we can't modify those values while the game is running. So there are three different flavors of scripting languages when it comes to Unreal Engine mods. There's Blueprints, Lua, and C++. And for, at least in the case of Stalker 2, until we get an SDK, we can't even make C++ mods. So that one is out for the time being. But in my opinion, the Blueprint scripting language within Unreal is going to be far superior simply because it is more tightly integrated into the engine, and it's overall simpler to use and has a lower barrier of entry of understanding what you need in order to actually create a mod and start scripting. So I'm not going to cover Lua or making C++ mods in this series. So the scripting is going to be focused specifically on blueprints. So now we're at the point where we're actually going to start downloading and setting up your modding environment. So the first tool that going to be the most widely used across all of the different types of mods that you could make for Stalker 2 or the Unreal Engine is FModel. And FModel is highly, highly recommended. In downloading FModel, you can actually go to the Wiki, and in the Creating Mods section, there are going to be some recommended tools in this section right here. This is a brand new installation I'm doing here. I'm not using my actual development system to go over these tutorials because I wanted to show how to do all the setup from nothing. With a fresh install, click on this link to download FModel. When it opens, just extract this to a folder. Now I am going to, because this is a new install, I'm actually just going to create a, here we go, on the C drive. This is what I typically do. I create a new folder on the C drive. You can call it whatever you want. I call it assets. And then inside of here, I'm going to create a new folder called just UE for UE mod tools. So that file that we just downloaded for FModel, I'm just going to drag this zip folder over here and then extract it. And so now we should have another folder, or one folder in here in the same directory. I'm going to get rid of the original zip because I don't really need it anymore. So I'm going to go ahead and open it. Actually, you know what? I'm just going to put a shortcut here on the desktop. So in this case, I need to download .NET Desktop. Yeah, it's a good thing I did this on a fresh install because a lot of these prerequisites I already have installed on my development computer. So let's see where this journey takes us. Okay. Fair enough. Just open up the .NET runtime installation, and yes, install. Yes. Yeah, it didn't take too long. So now just open up FModel again. We should see, yep. This is what you'll see the first time that you open it. You don't really want to mess with these three options just yet. First, click on Add Undetected Game. And I'm going to go ahead and name this Stalker 2. And then in here, we're going to have to provide the directory to our game's content packs folder. There are a couple different ways to find that, but probably the easiest, or rather fastest, is to run this command in your Windows command line. If you don't know how to get to the command line, you can actually just hold down the Windows key and press R. So Windows R, and then just type in CMD and OK, and that'll open up a command line for you. But the command we're going to want to run is this command right here, and this should give us the folder that we're going to need to provide right here in the directory. So I have a Steam installation, so this is the path to the packs folder for my Steam installation. Yours may look different if you don't have Steam. Click on plus. Now we should see the detected games change to Stalker 2. We need to change the Unreal Engine version because Stalker 2 runs in Unreal Engine version 5.1. So it'll look like this, game_UE5_1. And then once that's done, click OK. If it asks you to download the latest release, just go ahead and click on that and say yes. Okay. So this is, if everything worked correctly, you should see a bunch of, well, FModel should open, and then you should see a bunch of files that look like this. They end in, .pak, utalk, etc. These are the actual game files themselves. This, however, doesn't provide us very much information. So what you can do is you can actually click on load, make sure the loading mode is on all. This will take a little bit. And once it's done, you're going to see something that's a little easier to interpret. We're going to have two root folders here, Engine and Stalker 2. We're really going to be interested in this Stalker 2 folder. So I'm going to expand that. Now we have three different folders underneath there. We have config, content, and plugins. Content is probably going to be the folder you're going to be looking at when you're doing research into data mining the game. This is going to be the one that's going to have most of the juicy content in it. So in here we have a ton of different game file folders that we can go through. One feature that's really useful if you are trying to find something specific and you don't know where it exists within the actual pack structure, you can go up here to packages and search, and you can search for anything that's in the game by name or by pattern. So let's search for something. Let's see if we can find the model for the bloodsucker. So I'm just going to type in bloodsucker, enter. So there's a lot of files in here. But I know what I'm looking for is going to contain, it's going to start with SK. So I think it's SK bloodsucker. Yeah, there you go. SK is short for skeleton or skeletal mesh. So open up this, and then we see this down here where it says failed. Now the reason it's failed and we can't open up this asset is because we don't have a mapping file. So we can see right here it's telling us no mapping file, can't serialize. Well, we can fix that. So we'll go ahead and fix that right now. In order to do so, we're going to need to install something else, UE4SS, and that's a tool set that has a feature inside of it where we can actually extract the mapping file from the game itself. I'm going to minimize FModel. I'm going to go back to the Stalker 2 Wiki, creating mods, and I'm going to find UE4SS. Scroll to the very bottom. You're going to want the zDev version. So we're just going to click on that guy, open up the containing folder, and I'm going to copy that zip that we just downloaded. And now we need to actually go to our Stalker 2 binaries directory. In the interest of time, I'm just going to go directly to it. For the Steam install, it's under Program Files, Steam, Steam Apps, Common, Stalker 2, Binaries, and Win64. Other versions, this might actually say Win, GDK, or Windows. That's fine. But the folder you're looking for will have Stalker 2 something and then shipping in it. Now I'm going to paste that zip in here, right click, extract all. And by default, it's going to try to make another folder inside of this Win64 directory. We don't want that. We actually want it to extract directly to the Win64 folder. So click on extract. It'll take a little bit, and now you should see there's a handful of new folders that were added. So one thing I would recommend doing is going to the UE4SS settings and changing a few things. So this is the configuration file for UE4SS. There are a couple of things I would recommend that you change. One, by default, it doesn't have the major and minor version of the Unreal Engine. So we know that Stalker 2 runs with Unreal Engine version 5.1. So we want a 5 here and a 1 here. And scrolling down a little bit, console enabled, the regular console, we want to turn that off. We just want the GUI console. We'll see that here in a couple seconds when we actually open up the game. And then there's one more change. Graphics API. Yep, that's it right there. So you can try it with OpenGL. I have, on my systems, have never really gotten this one to work. So I typically just change this to DX11. Once you've made those changes, just save this and close it. And now we're good to actually run the game. So this is the new window that you should see pop up whenever you have UE4SS installed. So once the game actually loads up, I am going to put it into, there we go. I'm going to move this off to the side for now, and I'm going to get out of full screen mode. So now you should see that you have two windows whenever the game starts up. You're going to have this UE4SS debugging tools window, and you have the actual game itself. So in order to get the mapping file, we're going to need to, inside of this GUI debugging window that is provided to us by UE4SS, we're going to click on the Dumpers tab, and then we're going to click on Generate US Map File. So once we click on that, we can go back to the console to check to see if it's done. So you should see that it started the map generator, and then pretty much in the same, it doesn't take very long to do it. The mapping generation file will be completed successfully. If you see that, then you're good. So I want to go ahead and close the game. And now we're going to go back to FModel, open it back up, make sure to load again, and get to the point where you can see engine and STALKER 2. Now under settings, we're going to go to general, and under local mapping file, just go ahead and toggle this to enabled and click on the little 3 dots. We're going to go to our STALKER 2 install directory. Once again, this is for Steam. It may be different if you downloaded using a different game store. But once we're in the root directory, we want to go to STALKER 2 binaries Win64, and we're going to see that mappings file that we just generated. Go ahead and click on it, and then open, and then say OK. So now we should be able to go back to packages and search for our bloodsucker. And when we double click on this guy, yep, there we go. That is what we were looking for. So this is an example of sometimes when you double click on assets with an FModel, it'll actually open up a new window to show you either the texture or model or sound that you may be looking at. So we looked at a model. Let's look at what it's like to open up audio in the game. In STALKER 2, the vast majority of the audio is going to be under STALKER 2 content root folder right here, underscore, and then all capital STALKER 2. I know there are multiple ones. Why there are multiple variations of the same spelling, only GSC could answer that question. But under this folder, we have audio, and under audio, we have WI's audio. And in here, what we want to look at is events, because this game uses a plugin called WI's, which is made by a company called Audio Technica or something like that. I forget. Not a big fan of this framework, simply because it's not really intuitive or easy for mod makers to use. I know that the game studio really doesn't care. I mean, they're worried more about what makes it easier for them to make a game, and that's all well and good. It's not just simple WAV files that we're looking for. There's a certain process we have to go through to understand where the actual files that we can open are. So I'll give you an example of one point in time I wanted to find the music for the Faust boss battle, because it's a banger. I just wanted to get it. So that, if we look in here under events, I think it's under music. Yeah, music, boss fights, and Faust. So in here, we're going to have, I'm just going to go ahead and open phase 1. And if we look at the data in here, we don't really have to know exactly what all of these properties are. When we kind of read this, we can see kind of what it's referring to. There's some nice naming conventions and metadata in here that give us clues as to what we're looking at. So for example, if we look at this media property here, we can see references to media IDs, to debug names that kind of give us a decent idea as to what this record is describing. So I'll go ahead and peel back the curtain because I've already researched a little bit on this one. This is actually the phase 2 loop Faust boss battle music. So we see that there's a media path name in here, and this provides us with media and then a number and then a .wem. WEM extension is WY's specific compression format. We can open those up in FModel as if they were just regular WAV files. So that's what I'm going to do, as opposed to trying to find where this is, I'm just going to double click on this number. I'm going to copy it. I'm going to go to search, paste that in, press enter, and yep, I got one reference here to media, that number, and then .wem. So I'm going to right click on it and say extract a new tab, simply just so that it pops up in a new tab. There we go, the music's playing. That's where that particular piece of audio resides, and that's how we would get to it. You can kind of use the same process that I described to just kind of poke around and find things. All right, so I'm going to cut the first video off here. We've covered quite a bit in this first one. So going forward, we're actually going to start making some mods. In the next videos in this series, imagine the next one's going to be probably make a configuration mod, then an asset replacement mod, then we'll jump into blueprint logic mods. Thanks for sticking with me on through the entirety of the first video in the series, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.